Okay, guys, welcome to day two of Moderation Made Easy, your guilt-free holiday blueprint. I am going to get started here. So here's the deal. This 3-day series is a small piece of my macros to moderation mini series, mini course. This is probably one of the most popular courses that I have, and it's literally how I have eaten, the way that I approach my nutrition. And I've been doing this for about 5 years. It is a practice. It took me, in all transparency, it took me probably a year to get really good at it. So just know that some of the strategies that I'm giving you over these 3 days, like it's going to take some practice. But what you will find is that as you start to implement these practices, that you can experience more food freedom than you probably have in a long time. If you are like most women, like I used to be, like most of the women who come to me, you may have a tendency to do all or nothing when it comes to nutrition, right? So what moderation does is it gives you actual tools that allow you to have food freedom while still working towards a goal. So just know that a moderation style of eating does not mean that you cannot do fat loss. I help my clients with this too. So there are periods of time where we track food, and there are also periods of time where I have them stop tracking food and learn a moderation approach. So I wanted to share some of these strategies, these techniques to give you tools to navigate the holiday season instead of being someone like most people who will gain that extra, 8 to 10 pounds over the holidays. You can learn how to take these strategies and be able to either, yes, if you want to lose weight, you can, or at the very least, maintain your weight through the holidays without feeling like you can't eat the foods that you love. So let me go in and I'm going to share my screen so you guys can see this. Make sure I have the right one up. Give me just a sec here. I think I've got it up. And then as I go through this, if you guys have questions, I'll try and keep an eye on the chat box. So you can jump into the chat. I will try to answer them depending on the question as I go. I do want to keep these calls very, very short and sweet and simple so that they're easy to digest, but I also want to make sure that I'm answering your questions. So feel free to jump into the chat, ask away as we go. And then at the end, I'll open it up for questions if you have like a more elaborate question. That I'm happy to do that as well. So this is day two of Moderation Made Easy, your guilt-free holiday blueprint. And what this means is I actually learned this philosophy, this practice, Moderation 365, about 5 years ago. It's a course that I actually took. And as I mentioned, I wasn't very good at it at first. When I started with it, I had I had probably been with Micah for about a year. I had been single for a really long time, and so I felt like I could control my environment. I was dairy free, I was gluten free, and I felt great. I was in great shape, but I was very limited in my ability to maneuver family outings, social events. Like I could only eat certain things, and so I felt very limited that way. And then when Michael and I got together, and then I moved to Seattle, and we moved in together, it was him and his then son who was in high school, and they eat drastically different than the way that I eat. And there was literally like pastries just all over our counter, which is kind of my weak spot, right? So what I found was that I was having a hard time maneuvering eating in a healthy lifestyle without pounding a bunch of pastries every single day because they were in my face. Like I couldn't just have one. And so I was introduced to Moderation 365 from one of my mentors about 5 years ago, Jill Coleman. And I was like, I really want to get good at this. Now, I do find and I do believe that there is value in doing food tracking. If you've never done it before, I recommend that you do so that you can actually see what it is that you're doing. And when my clients come to me, they do a lot of food tracking, especially in the beginning. But I also have them learn a moderation approach because the reality is there's going to be weekends, there's going to be vacations, there's going to be holidays where you're not going to be able to track everything. For those of you who follow me on social media, I just got back from 12 days in Italy, and I was certainly not going to track my food, which I don't do most of the time anyway. There was, let me just say, protein and vegetables were scarce. And so Moderation 365 is how I maneuver through that in a way that I actually ended up losing a couple pounds, not intentionally, but I certainly didn't gain, right? And I enjoyed pizza I enjoyed pasta. I had wine every single day. I'd say the best thing that I had were these little chocolate croissants. They were my favorite. So this will, as you practice it, give you a lot more food freedom. Let me double check. There's no questions. Okay. So the moderation approach we talked about this yesterday. This is not intuitive eating. There's actual structure to it, and it's using biofeedback tools to cue you in to things like hunger, energy, cravings, instead of relying on having to count and track. So it minimizes the effort and energy behind eating so that you can do this in a sustainable way. And again, this is basically how I eat most of the time. I very rarely track anymore. I spot check, but most of the time I'm using a moderation approach in order to maintain where I'm at right now. So yesterday we talked about the DIS scale, and I wanted to review it just very, very quickly because the deprivation to indulgence scale is where most women live, right? So think about it. Deprivation is I have to be perfect. This is like my meals. I need to make sure that I'm meal prepping. I've got to make sure that I'm hitting my targets exactly. You're scaling back maybe in calories or whatever. It's like this perfect idea of what nutrition should look like. And usually for women, that means no sugar, no alcohol, no eating out, no nothing, right? Like it's just like basic nutrition to fuel my body, right? I have to be perfect. And then what happens is that the higher the swing, right, will swing into indulgence where I've ruined it. So maybe you were doing really, really well. I get this a lot with new clients who are like, I do really, really well in the morning, but then in the evening is where I start snacking and I can't stop. And the reason that they think that they're doing really well is that in the morning their calories are very low. And so they're eating like perfect. But then they swing into overindulgence because maybe they have a couple pieces of chocolate in the afternoon at work, right? And all of a sudden they maybe have one more than they thought they were going to, and then the next thing you know, they're eating a handful of chips, they're grabbing some almonds, and they're having 2 glasses of wine, and they're like, I ruined it. So they have a big dinner, like, I'll start fresh tomorrow. That is the swing. And you have to know that both of those things are extreme. So the higher you swing into deprivation, the higher you're going to swing into overindulgence every single time. So what we want to do is take the swing out and keep it here. It's never perfect, but it's also never where you ruin it or you're overindulging, right? So moderation cuts to the middle. So you're not depriving, you're also not overstuffing. And here's why we want to take a look at this today, especially because we're going to talk about how moderation has to include satisfaction. Because remember, if we're cutting out all the good stuff and food is just here just to keep us alive, right? That is how you're going to end up swinging into overindulgence. So there has to be a level of satisfaction built in. And here's what that looks like. If we were going to put this on a scale of 1 to 10, checking real quick. We're going to put this on a scale from 1 to 10. What we want is an 8. And an 8 is I'm good. 1 is I'm not satisfied. I feel like I'm missing something. I'm hungry. That's the 1. 10 is I'm over satisfied. I've eaten too much. I'm feeling a little bit stuffed, that kind of thing, right? What we want is an 8. I'm good. Could I eat more? Sure. But do I need more? Not really. I'm feeling pretty good. And that's what we're shooting for in moderation with all of your meals, because meals do not happen in isolation. Now, if you caught the coaching call from yesterday, I explained what my DNCs, your daily nutritional commitments, are. And if you haven't watched the replay, go back and watch that. I build my DNCs around breakfast because I know that meals don't happen in isolation. So even if I'm not being perfect, if I can get my breakfast and my blood sugar good in the morning, the rest of the day will naturally just kind of fall into line. Now, if I don't nail my breakfast, the rest of the day is going to be really hard to catch up because blood sugar will start to be affected. Let me give you an example of that. A lot of times if I go to Arizona or if we're out and we're traveling or something and I see a yummy pastry or something like that. So for example, when we were in Italy, these chocolate croissants are amazing, super, super good. And I actually did do this one day because we wanted to stop before we got on our flight back, is if I have that first thing in the morning, that is basically going to ruin my blood sugar. If I don't have water in my system, if I don't have protein in my system, that is going to start my day with blood sugar that is not regulated. And what that means is I'm going to spike my blood sugar, it's going to crash, and it's going to affect my hunger levels later in the day. It's going to affect my energy levels. It's going to affect cravings later in the day because it doesn't happen in isolation. So when I put my DNCs together, I make sure that I build them around breakfast. I make sure that I hydrate first thing in the morning. I make sure that I get enough protein first thing in the morning. And then I let the rest of the day kind of unfold as it's going to. So when I was in, and I shared this yesterday when I was in Italy, what I would do is I would hydrate first. I would have my protein shake. I would have some eggs with that. And then I would go and have the croissant, and it kept my blood sugar more stable throughout the day. So just keep in mind that the way that you eat, your meals do not happen in isolation. They're all connected. So keep that in mind. When we're building our meals, what we want to do is make sure that we're increasing satisfaction enough to where we're at that I'm good spot. We're not feeling deprived. We're also not feeling overindulgent. We want that like nice, sweet 8 spot of I'm good. And here are some ways that you can do this. It's funny, I was talking to a client earlier today, and we were talking about food logging and how challenging she has found that to be and how she has avoided it. And I said, the only reason that it's complicated for you is because you're used to making recipes. You're used to making like these meals that include a lot of ingredients. That's why it makes it hard. But if you're eating, she goes, I know, but that's just so basic. And I'm like, yeah, but basic is what gets you to the goal, right? Like you take the basic single ingredient foods and then you add satisfaction to it. And so ways that you can do this is, let's just say the typical, broccoli and chicken and rice that everybody thinks about in terms of fat loss. Well, you can take those very basic things and increase the satisfaction in different ways. So one way that you could do that is by increasing dietary fats as your condiments. You could add a little bit of cheese. You could add a little bit of dressing. Now, obviously, you can't add a ton. We want to find that middle ground, but we want to add just enough that it gives you some satisfaction. So I'll do this with, especially now that we just got back, like Kalamata olives. I love the olives. They give anything that I eat a good flavor. You could do a little bit of cheese. That would be good. Again, a little bit of dressing in your coffee, adding a little bit of creamer, right? Like you can use different condiments that are going to give you that dietary fat, which is going to increase the satisfaction of your meal. We also want the taste factor. I'm a big win with this. Excuse me. I do like something a little bit sweet or something chocolatey after a meal. So we want to build that in. Well, I can build that into my day, right? So after lunch, I can have a little piece of cookie or something. I'm going to give another example here in a second. But it's a protein bar that I like that's very much like a brownie. So we want that taste factor. I also like a pleasant mouthfeel. Everybody has this, right? So is it crunchy? Is it smooth? Is it creamy? Is it frothy? So in your morning coffee, do you like it to be creamy? Do you want it to be frothy? Is there satisfaction in that? For me, the mouthfeel is pastries or cake. So like I do like sweets, but I'm not like a candy person per se. I don't find that as satisfying. I like pastries and cake. I like that spongy feel in my mouth. So what you want to do is pay attention to the things that you find very, very satisfying. So for me, I know that about myself, that I like that mouthfeel. I will always take a piece of cake or muffin over a piece of candy because I just find it to be more satisfying. So what I want you to do is, as you're going through this and thinking about it, I want you to go, okay, like what is it that, and even as you're eating, just start like doing a quick mindset or a mindfulness scan and go, okay, what about this meal do I find satisfying? When I go to snack, am I wanting something crunchy? Am I wanting something smooth? Like, what is it that I want that would be satisfying? Start paying attention to that because you actually do have preferences. Excuse me. So you can create pleasant food rituals. I have a lot of clients who like their morning coffee. That is a pleasant food ritual. It could be something, maybe it's your dinner. This is something that we learned in Italy. If you've never been, I can tell you that the meals are a ritual. They are a thing, right? So it's a pleasant ritual that you experience. We did not eat. It's how I probably ended up losing weight, is that they serve meals in like courses. I didn't want all of that food, so I would just like pick a couple of things and then that's what I ate and I was satisfied with that. But it still was an environment of a ritual and I still had wine with that meal because it was this ritual and it was interesting because Michael really doesn't drink that much, but even he started drinking wine because it was this pleasant food ritual of like relaxing with a glass of wine and food and connecting. So look at ways that you can create that. Again, a lot of my ladies like coffee in the morning is like a ritual for them. You want to look at alleviating cravings with a healthier workaround. This is what I was trying to head cold. This is what I was talking about with the protein bar that I have. I'm not a big fan of protein bars because I think that most of them just don't have enough protein in them to be called protein bars. And I just don't find them to be very satisfying. But I did find one that has a brownie texture. Now I will tell you, it's not satiating. So like if I'm hungry, it's not going to really keep me satiated very long, but it is satisfying in that after lunch, when I want something sweet, I can have a little bit of that bar. And because the texture is like a brownie and it's not super, super sweet, but it does have like a taste like a brownie. It's sweet enough that it helps give me that healthier workaround besides just going and eating a brownie. So you can take a look at some of the things that you're eating, you're craving, and find healthier workarounds. I do this with like I'll do paleo muffins quite a bit, like because again, I like cake, I like pastries. So I'll do things like paleo muffins when I want something sweet. I'm trying to think of other healthy workarounds. When I want chocolate, sometimes I don't always like crunch, but sometimes I do, and you can get the almonds that are like dusted in cocoa. And so sometimes those will give me just enough of a chocolate feel that I'm like, okay, I'm good with this, right? So you want to try and look at the things that you really like and see if you can find a healthier workaround that kind of keeps you moving in the right direction and alleviate some of that like craving for something. And then what I want to talk about today is something called preemptive cheats. What preemptive cheats do are they basically take the edge off of that craving that you're having, because what we want is to keep you so satisfied that you're not swinging into overindulgence. It's like I'm going to have just this thing, like me having that protein bar takes enough of the edge off that keeps me from eating a bunch of cake and crap in the evening. It's just enough to take the edge off, and it's nutritional relief. And what that allows us to do is eat similarly throughout the day and also eat similarly on the weekend as you do during the week. And I always tell this to my clients is I get this a lot where I'm either looking at a food log and I can see it, or they will say to me, I just struggle on the weekends because we eat out, we do these other things, and I just seem to have really bad, poor habits on the weekend. And part of it is environmental. You're on the go, you're eating out. So there is part of that. But another part of it that I see a lot is because you're escaping your boring ass food Monday through Friday. It's like it's so clean and it's so good that the second you get around something that's tasty, you don't have any control. And while Monday through Friday is not going to necessarily look exactly like your weekend, we don't want them to be vastly different. We want to find kind of that middle ground where they are not so different. So I want to kind of take the edge off of that. When it comes to moderation, you will find if you pay attention that you have a preference. So some people would prefer more of a richness over volume scale. And what this means is that if you are someone who you don't need like large portions, but you like heavier foods, you like the cheese. Like if I were to offer you let's say bread before you eat, or you could have extra cheese on your meal and you choose cheese, like you tend to go towards the fats. You would rather have a smaller portion of something that's a little bit heavier. Then you probably have more of a richness satisfaction. And you will have both, but you'll tend to go one or the other. People like me, I have more of a volume. I like fats, but I actually like volume. And so for me, what I find more satisfying is that I will tend to choose lower calorie foods, but I like to have a volume of it. And so when you're doing that, you're looking at lean proteins and fibrous vegetables because you're going to get more volume. That is more satisfying to me than something small like dietary fat. It's just my preference. So again, you'll probably find a little bit of both, but just pay attention to see like which one you tend to lean towards a little bit more. Now, this is one that comes up a lot. Again, this is a practice. In the beginning, I said this, it took me over a year to get really good at this. So the question is, what if I do this and I eat this now and still binge later? So what if I have that protein bar in an effort to try to do a preemptive cheat, but then I still binge later? Or this also happens is when you start to be around food that you feel like you don't trust. So like for me, it was pastries. I had to learn to be around pastries in order to learn how to do this. And in the beginning, I had to learn how to take bites of stuff and then walk away. And so I used to show this stuff on social media. I haven't done it in a while where I would take like a couple bites of a donut and then be like, and I'm done. Right. I do this with desserts all the time when we go out. Michael and I will split desserts. And so I've gotten really good at being able to take a couple of bites of something and then being like, I'm satisfied and walk away. And people will always ask, like, how do you do that? And my answer is always the same: through reps, through messing it up, through, like I said, pounding 3 different muffins in one sitting because I felt like I had no control. But with every time that you do it, you get a little bit better. So allow room for the practice of moderation. It takes time to learn this. Probably not as long as you think if you get really good at like, okay, I'm just going to pay attention to how I'm feeling and why I'm making the choices that I'm making. But just know that it is a practice and there is no arrival. I've got to say this because I think that especially with social media and you see like all these people who are ripped and they look amazing. And I even had a client say this to me yesterday was, I just feel like you see these people and they're so perfect that it's like, God, like I'll just never be able to do that. And I'm like, listen, I just ate 7 cookies. Like it's not like I've got this down to where it's perfect and I never ever overeat. It's rare. And I knew exactly why I did it. I knew exactly why I was craving. It's called sleep deprivation. It's called jet lag, and I've got a head cold, right? And a lot of stress around that. So I knew yesterday that I didn't feel good, that I was tired, and I started craving. So I made cookies and I ate 7 of them. It doesn't make me a bad person. It doesn't make me out of control. It makes me someone who is hormonal, and my body was like your brain, just so you know, carbs lower cortisol. I'm going to say that again. Carbs lower cortisol. Your brain knows that. So when your body, your physiology is under any kind of stress, sometimes your brain will release cravings because when you eat those carbs, it will lower the cortisol. That's what your brain wants. I knew that. I didn't care. It's not going to affect my overall physique because I don't do it all the time. So just allow room for practice, knowing that sometimes it's just not going to end up being the way that you think, but the more you do it, the better you will get at it. Keeping in mind that the more satisfied you are overall, the less likely you are to binge in moments when willpower is drained. And I thought I would share this as well because, like, again, a lot of you know that I just got back from Italy. And I got a lot of like, have pasta for me and have pizza for me and, drink a glass of wine for me and like all of these things. And I got to tell you, some of you are not going to believe this, but like, I'm not a big pasta person. I like pizza. I do like wine sometimes. Um, but I love the way I eat now. I like my chicken and my vegetables and my protein and the kind of simple things that I do because I've made them in a way that is very satisfying to me. So I don't ever really feel a need to go crazy with other food. So by me eating those foods, I actually wasn't all that satisfied with them. I found them to be just okay. I missed my protein. I missed my vegetables. In fact, Michael was kind of giving me crap because I ordered chicken one day. I was just like, I want some chicken. So what you want to do is be able to build meals that get you to the goal, but done in a way that keep you very satisfied because that is where you're going to get the sustainability factor from. So here's what I want you to practice. And we can do this today. If you guys want to jump in and into the chat and ask me questions, I'm happy to answer them. Is I want you to identify, and you can do this after the call as well. I want you to identify 3 to 5 preemptive cheats and how you will use them. And I'm going to try and give you a couple of suggestions or things to think about. And then if you guys have questions, you guys can jump into the chat and ask me. So like a preemptive cheat, for me, I don't drink cold brew every morning, but sometimes I kind of get in a kick and I will use a creamer that I really, really like. That is a preemptive cheat because it gives me enough satisfaction that for the next several hours, I'm like, I'm very, very satisfied. I find that to work really, really well. Um, Another preemptive cheat, if you will, and how I use it is the example. I really like these protein bars. I use them almost daily because they keep me out of the pantry. They keep me out of the chip bag. I can have a protein bar, this brownie protein bar with like an apple or something, and I'm super satisfied. And it keeps me satisfied all the way to dinner. That's a preemptive cheat. If I were to eliminate that, more than likely I would end up eating more for dinner and then wanting something sweet. Whereas after dinner, I can have like a small piece of chocolate and I'm fine. I'm trying to think if there are any other ones that I have. The almonds that I eat are a preemptive cheat. I use those when I want something crunchy, right? So I'll use those when I really want to eat chips, and I'll start with a few of those and see if I can satisfy myself with that. So I build things into my day so that I'm never out of control, except for on days like yesterday. But I'm rarely out of control. I just kind of hum along. And so then that way comes Saturday, Sunday, I don't feel a need to escape from the way that I'm eating the rest of the week, if that makes sense. So, do you guys have any questions or ideas on how you might use the preemptive cheats? And we can fine tune it just a little bit. Any questions before I close this out? I think we're good. Right. Okay, so that is it for today. Your assignment is to work on your preemptive sheets. Feel free to shoot them over. You can email me and go like, what do you think of these, Jen? I can help kind of tease them out for you a little bit and see what we can come up with. Yesterday was your DNCs, your daily nutritional commitments. Again, if you haven't watched that video, go back and watch that because that is the foundation of being able to eat a moderation style of nutrition. And then you're going to start to work in some of these preemptive cheats. So that's it for today. And then tomorrow we will wrap everything up so that you guys can start to use these strategies, these tools, as you head into the holidays and still be able to enjoy the holidays, not feel overly restricted, but also don't swing into overindulgence too far. So, all right, that's it for me today. I will see you guys all back tomorrow.